Okay, good evening to you. Hope you are well. Hope you're feeling good. Feeling fine, feeling well. Anyways, so yeah, I just had a long day driving Uber. And God, it's just such a crapshoot. I don't even know if I want to say it that way. Forgive me. Let's scratch that. I don't know. I had this passenger today. Picked her up from, well, I won't even say, but I went and I picked her up, and she was waiting for the car. That's always a good thing. Always nice that you don't have to, burn time and money, potential money, sitting around waiting for somebody. So anyways, older woman, I would think in her 70s, maybe even older, I don't know. And so I picked her up. She got in, and it became pretty clear that she was physically not doing too hot, not doing too well. Had like a very I don't even know the a polite way to say this, but a very rattly, is that a word? A deep rattle in her cough. Like a lot of congestion, like, I don't know, some kind of, more than, it seemed like there was, she was really struggling. And also just, she seemed kind of like, well, I don't know. Forgive me. I sometimes hesitate to characterize people too strongly. I guess, yeah, it seemed a little bit rough. I'll just say it that way. And so, yeah, so I picked her up and we're driving to her destination. And I kind of hang back with some customers. I more and more trust things energetically, for at least for where I'm at right now. I'm not a huge talker anyways, but just basics, greeting somebody as they get in, how's it going, that kind of thing. And some people I might make a comment about the weather, or who knows, just some random thing occasionally happens. But I kind of let the energy kind of determine the moment, and I'm not going to really leak energy with a lot of people. It's sort of a mental health thing for me. It helps me to feel more balanced, more stable. And with some people especially, I just kind of don't engage as much. I'm just focused on getting them to their destination, and that was the case here. I felt like I just didn't feel that energy to engage that much. But at some point, she commented on the music. I think Dire Straits, Sultans of Swing, or I can't remember, probably the Sultans of Swing. And she kind of spoke up and said something. She said, I'm so glad you have nice music on. if you really listen, sometimes you can sense in to the direction a comment is going. Sometimes you can't, and sometimes you're wrong. But so I kind of, I try to hear things and let some space develop before I react too much. But after a few seconds, I said, "Oh, okay, that's good." And I said, I'm glad that you like the music or something. I don't know. And then she started going off about some Uber driver, I guess she had previously. And there's a way in which I just kind of filter stuff out. I'm just not gonna let certain things in to the best of my ability. I'm just not gonna, So I don't remember exactly what she was trying to say, but right in the middle of this, I don't know if tirade is too strong of a word or rant is too strong of a word, but when she's kind of going off a little bit about this driver, she, God, it's bad. It's pretty bad. Now, I described her as rough, but at 70 plus years of age and with some kind of medical things, there is a kind of, I don't know about meekness, and she's a smaller lady. I can't even think how to characterize it really, because part of me wants to say there was kind of a not endearing quality. That would be taking it too far. Sweet, that's not quite right either. I don't know. Let me see if I can find the right word for it, but it's not quite there. It's definitely not sweet, but meek or something. Anyways, where you don't feel like really threatened. I mean, I felt a little bit kind of, there's a lot of like phlegm and things, and just her general presentation, I didn't feel super. Anyways, but she's talking about this person, and again, I can't remember exactly the details, so forgive me here. But at some point, she stops and she says, and excuse me for saying this, and there's, I wish I could think of the right word here, because it's almost like a nakedness. Sometimes when people get old, it's just like they lose their filters in almost like a childlike way or something. I can't think of the right way to characterize it, but she says, excuse me for saying this, but this N-word, she just straight up says the N-word. Forgive me for laughing here. It was just such a, or don't forgive me. I mean, something about it was kind of funny. Not because it's obviously not because it's a good thing to say. It was just, it's like there was an energy there of just this total, I mean, not total nakedness, not total, it's almost like she didn't, the affect she had compared to what she just said was so incongruent, not totally incongruent, but it's such a radioactive atomic word to just say. God. There's kind of a contrast absurdity there or something, the way she kind of prefaced it was by saying, trying to be kind of socially polite, like, and pardon me for saying this, I'm trying to think what would have been in the realm of severity or the realm of, when you preface a thing like that in the tone and the affect, what one might expect somebody to say. Pardon me for saying this, but she had a real bad attitude, or he had a real bad attitude. I can't even think what would have made sense, but it was just such a leap to this, atomic, And so, I mean, it was pretty shocking, to be honest. I was kind of shocked. I mean, the whole thing was just kind of wild, but yeah, it was interesting, to say the least. It was interesting. So she said that, and keep in mind, again, I'm trying to paint a fuller picture here, because this is an older woman, seems to have a medical thing going on. There's a kind of obliviousness or something there that I'm struggling to find the right way to say it. And in fact, well, yeah, let me get to that in a second. So, yeah, that happens, and I just shocked for a second, like, what the hell did I just hear? And I say something to her at that point. I say, because she's going off on this rant, I say, I hear what you're saying, and you cannot use that word in this car, or something to that effect. I don't remember exactly, but we're not going to use that kind of language in this car, And it's one part of this whole thing that's interesting is how I processed the experience, and was like, there's all these different dimensions and data you take in on somebody, and you try to compute that into a response, a tone, an energy, the actual words that you use, your word choice, and you're driving and you're trying to get somewhere and you're navigating traffic, and it's kind of shocked. And it was interesting in a couple of different dimensions. Well, let me get to that here in a second. So I basically told her, yeah, we're not going to do that. I did think, do I just kick this lady out? I had that thought. I did not. I did not kick her out. We were probably a mile away. Well, yeah, let me get into the reasoning for all that in a second. But so I did not kick her out. I just kind of, emphasized multiple times, that kind of language is not going to fly. Let's not use that. And she said, I can't remember exactly, but she just kept saying, like, oh, I never use that kind of language. I never use that. I never cuss. I never use that kind of language. I've got a grandson, and I'm doing everything I can to keep this grandson of mine from cussing. And there's things I probably would have said differently in retrospect, But again, it's kind of hard to process everything, compute everything. And so we get to the destination, and it turns out it's like I don't know if it's an urgent care or a clinic or something, but my sense of where she was at medically, seemed to be kind of confirmed with where we ended up going. It was like she was going to the doctor, basically. And as she was getting out, I re-emphasized to her. I said, I can't have that kind of language. You can't be using that kind of language. Or I can't remember exactly how I said it. I think I said I can't have that kind of language in the car. Or I'm not willing to drive people. I can't remember exactly what I said, but I said, I'm probably not going to, just so you know, I'm probably not going to accept a ride from you in the future. Anyway, so I expressed that to her, and she wasn't like, you never know how somebody's going to fly off the handle or what. Her reaction was not to escalate, or I think part of it is just because she's kind of old. She just kind of kept saying, you know, I never use that kind of language. I never cuss, and so that was basically the interaction. Now, it's interesting where I'm at nowadays with all these things, and you know, I've talked a little bit about my journey out of a more identitarian, radical left type of an orientation. I mean, this is many years ago now that I've moved in a different direction. But it's interesting how there's still and I've worked to kind of get a lot of that ideological trance out of my brain, and you know, to be more present and less ideologically captured, you know, in the ways that I'm filtering the world. And so this was an interesting moment, because the way I would have reacted to that in the past, it would have activated this whole kind of, again, ideological machinery or apparatus within me of almost like a militancy towards somebody. Like her saying that would have been evidence of, you know, this whole vast horizon of philosophical, ideological commitments around systemic, you know, it's hard for me to even use this language anymore. It just kind of makes me nauseous, but around oppressor, oppressed, white privilege, etc. I don't even want to say those words. It just feels so corrupted to me. But so I would have had a very different, more militant, it just would have triggered me to this kind of trance, almost ideological trance. And I felt vestiges of that, I guess, is one thing that was interesting. I could feel some of that kind of like stirring within me when I heard that. Part of me was shocked, part of me, maybe more after the fact, just kind of the absurdity of it. And there's a little bit of, I hate to say it, I don't know if I hate to say it, but there's a little kind of humor in the whole thing. And that's not something I would have ever said in the past. Again, it's not because I think that's a good word or something. But yeah, so some of that was stirring within me, like, oh my God, I need to report this person. Well, I don't know if I had that thought, but I need to kick him out of the car. I need to do this. I need to do that. Because that ideological fixation is so one-dimensional, and you're filtering the world in a very narrow way and discounting so many other factors about a human being and about a context and about a situation and about your priorities, and you become this kind of puritanical freak. Yeah, so there was, you know, some of that got triggered, but in some sense, I'm happy that happened on the one hand, because it helps me to see it and expose it within myself a little bit. But I was also happy to see that I have made some progress away from that way of viewing the world, where in that moment I was able to kind of, it didn't totally I didn't totally fixate, you know, it didn't become this kind of obsessive fixation that I had to target and destroy, you know, for the cause of liberation of the world or whatever. No, it was like, this is, again, that's kind of why I tried to paint this picture. It's like, this is an older lady, quite a bit older, you know, 70, 80. Doesn't excuse anything, so please, that has nothing to do with what I'm talking about here. But and I certainly didn't, you know, well, I don't even need to go down that path. But it's an older lady. She seems to be having some kind of a medical condition. I directly addressed it to her and said, we're not going to do that. Had she gotten really hostile at that point and started, amping up and going on, it could have unraveled in many different ways. Sometimes I have the sense for some people, especially older generations, they don't have this woman obviously knew it was an inappropriate and bad thing to say, as evidenced by her. And this was kind of funny too, when I was dropping her off, and I, kind of laid into her a little bit again and said, we're not going to be doing that, and I probably won't give you a ride again. She said, oh, well, I guess you didn't hear me that I said, forgive me for saying this. And I was like, no, I heard you. But that's not like a get out of jail free card that you can just say anything after you say that, which in her mind it seemed like it was. It's like sometimes people just don't realize how wild some of the things they say are, and especially I think maybe as you get older and you've got other complications. Who knows what else is going on in this older lady's life? Attitudes obviously were different when she was younger. Again, that doesn't exonerate or excuse it, but it gives some context. I felt like, it's just a mile more to go, and I'm going to drop her off, and, she doesn't, yeah, and she's just kind of this frail, sick old lady, anyways. And so I just spoke honestly back to her. It's like, she's going to say this, I'm going to say my piece. It's like, no, we're not going to do that. I'm not going to have that in my car. But I also calibrated. I guess that's another point, is like when you're less ideologically fixated, you can bring in more dimensions. You can figure out, is this the end of the world that I just heard this woman say this word? No, it's not. It's really not. It's not the end of the world. Some people would say it is. I kind of want to just get on with my day. It's not like, and the other thing is like, it's not like any amount of hectoring or at this stage in her life, is going to, or shaming, or, I mean, how effective is something like that going to be? How much energy am I going to put into trying to change somebody's long-held convictions on something, or the way that they see the world? And, I don't know her background, how she was raised, what was appropriate in her life, kinds of culture she was raised in. And, it's like, how much energy am I going to put into this? It's like, no, I said my piece. I don't agree with it. I'm not going to have it. I set a boundary about, I'm probably not going to pick you up again. I think I blocked her. Pretty sure I blocked her. But I also wasn't going to, anyways, yeah. And I even had some laughter. And again, please hear me. Not about the word. It's such a radioactive nuclear word. It's insane that in a sense I feel I have to express that over and over again. But just the incongruency, there's a word for it, of the moment of coming out of this little old lady's, again, she was kind of a little bit on the rough side, but just the way she introduced it, and just, tumbling out of her mouth apropos of nothing, really. I guess I opened the door by responding to her comment about my music, but And all the context and matters for how I choose to respond to something like that, how big of a deal I choose to make it. I don't really like that word. I'm not a vulgar person in general. Yeah, I'll cuss sometimes, but if it's mean-spirited towards other people, I'm not gonna, that's not, I don't like that, And see, with that word, it's hard to hear that word and not, in a way, it felt like the poison of that word or the reactivity around that word for me, hearing that and the kind of, ideological machinery that would provoke at an earlier stage for me, that was not as present, and that was good. Because then you can just hear it for what it is. It's just an unkind, harsh, unnecessary, rude, hurtful thing to say, But, yeah, I mean, it's just kind of as simple as that. But I also think there's wisdom in not overly prioritizing or losing one's own peace, when something like that happens. And also recognizing the limited returns on having a major reaction towards somebody, depends if it's your child and you're raising them, yeah, then that's going to be a different response. So all that stuff matters. Not sure if there's anything else I want to say about it. It was a shocking and strange and it's a moment to reflect upon for sure. All the different layers but it feels more connected to approach it as just like, this is just two humans. This is, expressing, and I'm just expressing from my heart. I don't like this. I don't like this in my car. It wasn't about, going off on some ideological rant and destroying the enemy or something. It wasn't like that at all. So, may you be well. Take care.